Have you ever covered a carpet stain with a rug, ignored a leaky faucet, pretended your half-painted living room is supposed to look like that? Well, you're not alone. We've all got unfinished home projects. But there's an easier way. Thumbtack is the app that makes it easier to care for your home. Pull out your phone and in just a few taps, search, chat, and book highly rated pros right in your neighborhood. Download Thumbtack and start caring for your home the easier way.
Achieving a gorgeous grin from home isn't a total mystery with Bite Clear aligners. Just don't be surprised if all of your sleuthing friends start asking, "What's your secret?" Begin by ordering your at-home impression kit today for only $14.95. Bite Clear aligners are doctor-directed and delivered to your door. Treatment costs thousands less than braces. Plus, they offer flexible financing, accept eligible insurance, and you can pay with your HSA FSA. Get 80% off your impression kit when you use code WONDERY at Byte.com. That's BYTE.com. Start your confidence journey today with Byte.
What's up, guys? It's three-time NFL Pro Bowler, all-decade return specialist, Josh Cribbs. I want to welcome you to the Mac Sports Connection podcast, where Alex hosts all things Mac, all things football, all things sports, right here, Mac Sports Connection, baby. The Mid-American Conference best, bringing it only the great Mac to everyone.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Mac Sports Connection podcast, part of the Varsity Podcast Network, presented by Learfield. I'm your host, Alex the Captain. Thank you so much for joining me this week. I know we want to talk college football. Big week for the Mid-American Conference. Huge upset by Northern Illinois. Go Huskies, getting it done in South Bend, 16-14. But I want to touch on the other fall sports first. These sports are just as important, frankly, probably if not more important to these athletes and their families. Anytime you get great wins and great opportunities for your football program on the road against Power 5 opponents, whatever, that's all well and good. But I want to be sure and be very clear that I want to give flowers to the teams who have earned them in these other sports as well. And we're going to start off with field hockey. First off, I want to give the flowers to Ohio. Yes, they are consistently one of the better teams in the Mid-American Conference. Currently, they sit at 2-2. They have losses to Stanford and Albany. But I want to be very clear. They have a win over Vermont, a 2-1 win over Vermont, and they had their fly the flag moment just a couple days ago on September 8th. A 3-2 double overtime victory over the Spartans of Michigan State. And I wanted to give these girls their flowers. They earned them. This was a huge win for the program, a huge win for the conference. So hats off to you ladies. Just looking at what you guys have done and looking at how competitive you guys have been in years past, this is shaping up to be another great year for Ohio field hockey, as they will try to knock off multi-time defending conference champion Miami this fall. I wanted to reach out and give flowers to the Ohio Bobcats and what they've done so far in the season. They take on Michigan here in just a couple days. In fact, in 2 days, by the time you guys hear this will be on Friday. They'll be at Michigan in Ann Arbor. Looking forward to a great match and reporting back on those results. Of course, James Madison, big win over Villanova to kick the year off. A double overtime win against American in Harrisonburg, Virginia. Say that 3 times fast. They start the season off 2-1, and looking at it, they have a loss to Monmouth, and moving forward, they actually travel back down to Harrisonburg, Virginia. They've been there now 3 times. I don't know if this is fully up to date. I'm looking at the schedule here on the Mid-American Conference website, but it very well could be. But James Madison getting it done, starting off the season 2-1, getting some great stuff happening. They do not start conference play until September 20th, where they will travel to Oxford, Ohio to take on the Miami Redhawks. So hats off to James Madison, the Dukes, the Royal Dukes. Maybe it's just the Dukes. I don't know. But hats off to James Madison, what they've gotten done to kick off the year so far. Now, you guys know how much I love the Miami field hockey program, so I've got to talk about them for a minute. Kicked off the season 2-0, a nice 2-1 win over Bucknell, and then a win 5-0, shutting out and completely routing St. Francis. Lost a tough one in Iowa City to the Hawkeyes, 2-0 loss. And then tomorrow, or I guess today by the time you guys get this episode, they travel to Indiana to take on the Hoosiers of Indiana down there in Bloomington. Should be a great matchup. And then they travel all the way out to Princeton, New Jersey. Follow that up with a quick hop and a skip over to Piscataway over at Rutgers before kicking off conference play on September 20th against James Madison at home. Really looking forward to getting down to Oxford this year if I can. This Miami field hockey team holds a very special place in my heart. So I'm always, of course, going to be supportive of the entire conference, but I'm always going to support these ladies as well. So good luck to them as they kick off their campaign. And I'm just going to take a quick look over here at standings. I mean, really, a couple rough starts for, Kent State, Ball State, both 0-2, 0-5 respectively. But after that, it's Ohio, Bellarmine, the Longwood, App State, all sitting at 2-2, or 1-1 if you're Longwood. Central Michigan 3-2, Miami and James Madison at the top, 2-1 to start the year. So good luck to all the ladies competing in field hockey this year. I think the early favorite is once again the Miami Redhawks, and for good reason. They've dominated the conference. They've dominated everything they've done in terms of field hockey the last several years. So for good reason. They've earned that respect. Coach Inako Puzo has done a phenomenal job, and watch for Miami to repeat this year. They've got a great crop of ladies. Lost a few seniors. Isabel Parisi, the former All-American goalkeeper, is for the first time in 5 years no longer protecting the goal for the Redhawks, but they've got a lot of good things going on. I fully expect that they will once again be in the conference championship game, likely win a regular season championship. But hey, we got a long season ahead. Regular season kicks off the weekend of the 20th in the Mid-American Conference. Again, good luck to all ladies competing in field hockey this fall. Moving over to women's soccer, the usual suspects sitting at top once again. We've got Buffalo sitting at 4-0-1 with a .900 win percentage. 3-0 at home, 1-0-1 on the road. They've got a 2-game win streak right now, although they have a 5-game streak of being undefeated on the year. Up next in terms of conference standings, obviously conference play has not kicked off yet. We've got Akron sitting at 3-0-2, followed by Eastern Michigan, Northern Illinois, both at 4-1. Northern Illinois 4-1-1. Kent State, Ohio, both at 3-1-1. Miami at 3-1-2. Western Michigan at 3-1-2. Ball State sitting there at 4-2. Bowling Green at 3-2. Toledo 2-3-1. Central Michigan 1-4-1. And they've had some good wins. I mean, everybody in this conference has had some good wins to kick off the season. Buffalo, of course, winning at St. Bonaventure, or versus St. Bonaventure at Pittsburgh, tied with Cornell. And they've got a nice 3-0 win, kind of a dominant victory over Colgate. And they've got a great schedule. They've got 2 more games before they kick off conference play against Akron. I mean, they've done a really nice job this year of getting ready, kind of beefing up that schedule, getting ready for conference play. I think the biggest knock on the Mid-American Conference in pretty much every sport, if we're being really, really honest, is that the non-conference isn't good enough to overcome some of the deficiencies of conference play. And I think that's a little ridiculous. I do think that there's some merit to it, but I also think there's a little bit of ridiculousness to that. The conference is highly competitive, so when they all beat up on each other, and this is every sport, when they all beat up on each other, it looks like when you have 2 losses in conference play, it looks like it's nothing special. These are all good programs. I mean, the women's soccer's, all of them have done a great job. I'm always very impressed whenever I see Buffalo go out and play. Akron, of course, they've done a nice job on the season. They've got wins over Iona. They've got a win against Oakland and against Wright State. They also have a tie with Robert Morris down there in Pennsylvania. Then we go down to another usual suspect, Western Michigan. They've got a win at Northern Kentucky, a tie with Big Ten opponent Iowa, dominant effort over Marquette. They do have a 3-0 loss to Creighton. They did tie Wisconsin, and then they shut out Detroit Mercy. I mean, these are going to be good teams by the time you get to conference play. So I just want to make sure that we're not overlooking them. Ball State, we just saw them beat Michigan a couple days ago. This was literally, I think, 10 days ago now. They beat Michigan in Ann Arbor. Ball State also dominated Queens. They've got a game against IU Indy here this week. I believe they're a Division II program, but I mean, that's still, I mean, this is a great schedule. They have a 1-2 loss to Indiana. They shut out Purdue Fort Wayne. I mean, all of these programs are doing a great job. Even Central Michigan, who, yes, they're 1-4-1. They haven't been, in my opinion, as bad as what their record shows. They have a 2-0 loss to Kentucky, a Power 5 opponent. A 2-1 win over Cincinnati, a Power 5 opponent. All of their losses, except for Green Bay, have been to Power 5 schools. They have a loss to TCU down there in Fort Worth, Texas, and then a loss to Texas down in Austin. So, I mean, they've played a lot of road games. They've been beaten up a little bit, but they're still coming out. They're still battling. They're figuring it out. The loss to Green Bay was a 1-0 loss. They play Purdue Fort Wayne this week, and then the 19th, they kick off conference play against Eastern Michigan. Don't overlook what Central Michigan is doing. They're not great right now on paper. They've also played, I think, just looking at it, one of the hardest schedules here in conference or in non-conference play. So make sure you guys are checking out women's soccer as well. They're doing a lot of great things here in the Mid-American Conference. We're going to move to volleyball really quick, and I want to point out we still have one undefeated program in the Mid-American Conference, and that is Central Michigan. They are sitting at a perfect 6-0 on the season. They've knocked off Ferris State at Ferris State. They've beat Lindenwood in Illinois. They beat Illinois State at Illinois State. They've got a win over Albany at Albany, New York. Fairleigh Dickinson, they've got a win over them in this Albany tournament. And then they've got a win over Iona. Now they have the Chippewa Invitational, which should be great. I mean, they've got some solid teams coming in, Eastern Kentucky, Southeast Missouri. You've got Green Bay coming to town. I mean, these are going to be some fun games for them to kind of pick up some more non-con, really, I guess, more non-con wins, but more non-con opportunities. Then they've got Green Bay, they've got Duquesne, Robert Morris, all before they kick off conference play at Miami on the 26th. Central Michigan, hats off to you. Sitting at a perfect 6-0. Nobody else in the conference can claim that. Although Miami, Ohio, Western Michigan only have 2 losses apiece. I'm looking at this Western Michigan schedule. They've got a win over LMU, Loyola Chicago. They did drop a tough series to Clemson in Kalamazoo. And then they lost a tough one on the road versus Kansas up there in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. But then they bounced back and took a 3-1 set over Marquette on the 8th. Western Michigan looking to kind of pick up the mantle of where they left off a year ago. Dominated the Mid-American Conference, ran the table with the MAC wire-to-wire first place. Ladies looked excellent all year long, went undefeated in conference play, won the conference tournament championship, made it to the NCAA tournament. And this was a really good Western Michigan team. Logan Case is back for them again this year. Watch for them to be highly competitive as they move forward. And then you can't ever ignore Ball State or Bowling Green. Obviously, Ball State and Bowling Green both sitting at 3-3 in conference play right now. Bowling Green wins over Chicago State, UMBC, and Wright State. They have a loss to Dayton, a loss to Cincinnati, and then a loss to Illinois. This is a young team. They lost a few seniors. This is a young team. Watch for them to get better as the year goes on. They've got games against Illinois, Chicago, Brown, DePaul, a game against Ohio State in Columbus, and in Bowling Green. And I think that's going to be massive for both of these programs. Obviously, Ohio State, to them, not that big of a deal to make a day trip up to Bowling Green. For Bowling Green, it means everything to have a Big Ten team come into their house. They beat Michigan at home last year. I was at that match. Incredible match. Incredible opportunity for the Falcons to get a great win over Michigan. Watch for them to try to do the same against Ohio State this year. They kick off conference play on 9/27 against the aforementioned Ball State Cardinals. Ball State, they in their own right have looked pretty solid this year. Wins over Seton Hall and Bryant, a loss to FAU. They picked up a win against James Madison, losing, however, to Penn State and Kentucky on the road down in Lexington. Got games against Chicago State, Southern Indiana, and Butler, all before they kick off conference play against Bowling Green. Should be a great season for both of these squads. I'm really looking forward to seeing what they put out there on the court. And, these are great programs. Again, the MAC, consistently underrated, consistently puts great programs into the NCAA tournament. The MAC is super competitive. Don't overlook what these ladies are doing either. Speaking of paying attention, have you been paying attention that the Varsity Network app is now free? Well, let's be honest, it always has been. The Varsity Network app, presented by Learfield, is available for download now in the Apple Store or the Google Play Store, and you can listen to all of your favorite sports podcasts covering college sports, college football, basketball, whatever it is. Hundreds upon hundreds of podcasts, including yours truly, as well as live audio from events all over the country. You want to tune into the Ohio Bobcats football game? Say no more. Download the Varsity app and listen to that live every time the Bobcats take the field. You want to check out what Miami basketball is doing on the year? Go check out the Varsity app and download that so you can listen live on the go wherever you may be. Again, that is available for free in the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. Download the Varsity app today to listen to podcasts and hundreds of live audio broadcasts from all across the country. Week 2 college football has come. Week 2 has gone. And I think we're left with just as many questions as we had before the week started. Let's do a quick recap here of scores before we dive into too many of these games. Western Michigan traveled to Ohio State, lost 56-0. I don't think there's really much we need to talk about that. Western Michigan, obviously not their best effort out there this year. They couple injuries, couple guys going down early in the game. You do hate to see that. But, it's Ohio State. They've got a $52 million whatever roster. I think it's actually a $20 million roster this year. So they're the odds-on favorite to win the national championship. Western Michigan, you're still in a rebuild. A year ago, you went 4-8. You put up a great fight, at least as much as I could expect. But after what happened to Akron the week before, where Akron scared them in the first half, I think we all kind of saw the writing on the wall as to what was going to happen. And unfortunately, it was Western Michigan who was up next on the chopping block. Northern Illinois, we'll actually touch on that one last. Bowling Green traveled to Penn State, led Penn State for many, many minutes in this game. Ended up falling to the Nittany Lions over there in Happy Valley, 34-27. Bowling Green looked really good. Connor Bazelak, he led all passers with 254 passing yards. He looked excellent. Penn State, their defense, they shone. This was one of those games where you kind of look at it, and if you're at Penn State, you're happy to come out of this one the way you did. Jason Patterson for Bowling Green, 16 carries, 57 yards. Harold Fannin Jr., this guy is, and this is so tough, he has to be the MAC tight end of the year. I know that's not an award, but he has to be first team All-MAC. He has to be getting looks for at least some sort of All-American list. 11 receptions, 137 yards, 1 score. Dominated as a tight end. I mean, tight ends get a lot of opportunities to get catches. But he came out, he got 11 catches. He was averaging 13 yards a catch. You don't do that as a tight end, at least not that often. 1 score. Bowling Green, like I said, they were up at 1 point, 17-7 on the Nittany Lions. Penn State, of course, tied it back up about halfway through the second quarter, 17-17. Bowling Green punched it in, a Jamal Johnson 41-yard touchdown run before Penn State goes down and kicks a field goal to make it a 4-point game at the break. Penn State goes down, takes their first lead of the day. Here, late in the second quarter, is about 6 minutes, 13 seconds on a Nick Singleton 14-yard pass from Drew Allar. They take their first lead. Nick Singleton, again, another 41-yard run to give the Nittany Lions a 10-point lead. Jackson Cleather, he boots it up for a 42-yard field goal. Brings the Falcons within 3, but there's 47 seconds left in the game. Falcons needed to recover the onside kick to have a chance. Did not do so, but hats off to BG. I mean, they were just so good. So good this whole game. 375 total yards. They did have 2 turnovers, 20 first downs. I mean, they were matching Penn State blow for blow. This wasn't Penn State came out and had a sluggish start. No. Bowling Green came out and punched them in the mouth. It's not, and this is what I find interesting about the national media. It is never, ever, wow, such and such MAC team did great. It's always, wow, such and such Big Ten team or such and such SEC team looked bad. Can we stop with that narrative? Bowling Green looked excellent in this game. It doesn't matter that Penn State maybe didn't wake up for this game. I mean, if you look at Happy Valley, place was pretty packed. A lot of people wearing white and blue over there. But I think if you really look at this, Bowling Green came out and they punched, and I mean punched, Penn State in the mouth. You don't have a 10-point lead. You don't have a halftime lead the way that Bowling Green did when James Franklin had no answers for Scott Loeffler and his program. They figured out in the second half, but really it took you had to go to the second half. You had to score 2 touchdowns in the second half to pull off this victory. One wasn't enough. Bowling Green kicked a field goal towards the end of the game that would have sent it into overtime. No, you needed 2 touchdowns to win this game. I don't know. Just tells me that the gap between number 1 and number 8 is larger than the gap between number 8 and, well, whatever Bowling Green was ranked going into this game. They weren't in the top 25, I'll tell you that. Moving on, we've got Missouri taking on Buffalo. Buffalo under Pete Lembeau in his first year at the helm. At the helm for the Bulls. 38-0 loss over at Missouri. You know, Brady Cook, he looked excellent. I mean, you know, let's just call it what it is. We knew this was going to be a similar game to the Ohio State game that Western Michigan played in. I'm not surprised. Buffalo, you earned your paycheck. You've got Akron going to Rutgers, and this one was a little bit interesting. I was not overly impressed with Akron in this one. I mean, Akron, of course, is without Alex Adams, their star receiver, who should be back this week against Colgate. But, I mean, Akron came out. They were within 4 in the second quarter. Rutgers had 2 touchdowns in under 2 minutes in the second quarter to make this a lot bigger of a lead going into halftime, a 21-3 lead. Akron comes out. They punch in a touchdown in the third quarter. Rutgers responds with 4 more of their own before Akron punches in a touchdown in the fourth quarter. I don't know. It's tough because I've been high on Akron for the last couple of years because they've been so close for so long, and they just can't seem to get it done. I do think that they've got plenty to build on. There's a lot of stuff going on over in Akron. I mean, Ben Finley, you know, he came in 14 of 31, 138 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Taj Bullock, he was perfect, 3 for 3 for 13 yards. Combined, they were 50% for $150. Jordan Simmons, he had a nice day on the ground. 9 carries, 109 yards, 1 score. Taj Bullock, Charles Kellum, Ben Finley all had runs themselves. Adrian Norton, Amarian Granger, Jake Newell. These guys all contributed. Brian McCoy, I think he had a nice day. He had 11 tackles, 2 solo. Antavius Fish, 10 tackles, 1 solo. Shaman Cooper, 5 tackles, 3 solo. Justin Anderson. I mean, defensively, these guys all contributed. I mean, offensively, these guys, they contributed. But you're still figuring it out. You're missing pieces that you loved having a year ago. So I think if you're Akron, you knew what this game was. You've played back-to-back road games at Big Ten opponents. You finally get a home game against Colgate. That should count as a dub. Speaking of things that should count as a win, if you're Kent State, you can't lose to St. Francis at home. You just played what I thought was a decently competitive game against Pitt, until it wasn't, of course. And then you come home and you drop a game to St. Francis, a game in which, when you look at it, St. Francis led 17-0. Same as the Bowling Green Penn State game. You shouldn't lose a game like this. Kent State just looked all out of sorts in this one. I don't know if it was fatigue, if it was, exhaustion from the week before, but St. Francis came out to play, and play they did. I mean, Mac Plummer, the kicker for them, 50-yard field goal to get the scoring started. I mean, and they had big, big plays. Gavin Thompson had a 64-yard touchdown catch. Krishan McRae looked pretty good, but I think what we're seeing in this one, and we saw this in this game, and I didn't get to watch all of this, so if there's a Kent State person listening and you have more information, please share it with me. But we saw Tommy Ulatowski and Devin Cargman both playing in this one. I mean, Cargman, it looks like, was the overall starter. He went 22 of 38 for $193, a touchdown, and an interception. But we saw multiple guys play in this one. Tommy Ulatowski, he only had 1, so I'm looking at this a little bit closer now. He had a couple carries though, so he was in there for a few snaps. But I don't know if I'm Kent State. This loss doesn't go away. It stings. The FCS game was your only win a year ago. You can't get better if the bye game is the one that you were supposed to win. And, certainly you can go backwards. And I don't think they will. I think they'll figure it out. They'll be fine come conference play. They'll be competitive against the games and teams that they need to be competitive against. But I think that this needs to be a wake-up call for Kent State. You want to get better than you were a year ago? You can't drop a game to St. Francis. And I know what people are going to say about St. Francis. They've been a decent FCS team for a while. We know what they've been capable of. We know what they've done in the past. But I don't think, if you're serious about trying to move forward, last year they only had 4 wins. They weren't stellar. They played Western Michigan tough. They played Robert Morris tough. Their losses, all of their losses were save 3 games. All their losses were a 1-score game. The year before, granted, they were a playoff team. I'll give you that. They had 10 wins, 9 wins. So they were a good team the year before. They did lose to Akron in overtime back in 2022. So St. Francis is not a slouch by any means, but you can't lose this game if you're trying to improve on the year before and you're trying to get everybody to buy in. That's really my point. Unfortunately, Kent State drops the home game 23-17. We won't belabor that one too much. Missouri State travels to Ball State. I know what the final score said. It was 42-34 in favor of the Cardinals. But this one was not really as close as maybe what the score might have said. Ball State did a lot of scoring in the fourth quarter. They had 4 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. It was a tie game in after 3, so I will give my flowers to Missouri State for pushing Ball State a little bit. This is the first time we've seen Ball State in action all year, so I think there's something to be said for that too. You got to get those first game jitters out of the way. Missouri State, they already had their first game, so they figured it out. Missouri State was fine. But Ball State, they lit up in the fourth quarter. Caden Simone's, he was awesome. 28 of 38, 262, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. Braden Sloan, he had 21 carries for $1, 1 score. These guys came out and they played really, really well. Cam Pickett, he had 7 catches, 69 yards. He had a nice day. So I really think that Ball State's going to be fine. Obviously, you shake off the rust a little bit. You get past this Missouri State game. Vaughn Pemberton, he had a nice game, 6 carries, 22 yards. Nothing crazy, but you're getting your feet wet. Averaging almost 4 yards a carry. I'd take that as a coach. You want your guys to do 3 or better. If you're averaging almost 4, that's the way to do it. TJ Horton, 3 rushes for 20 yards. Caden Simonza, again, 6 rushes, 16 yards, and a score. He had 5 touchdowns out of Ball State's 6 on the day. So hats off to him for sure. Ball State did a really, really nice job trying to play smart football and kind of outpace Missouri State, and that they did. They pulled this one away. Ball State scored with a minute to go to make it a 2-score game. And then, of course, Missouri State comes back, punches it in super, super late, 13 seconds left on the clock, to make it a 1-score game. Obviously, can't recover the onside kick, and this thing is over. But, hats off to Ball State getting that win. Granted, FCS opponent, you get a real test this next week down there at the U in Florida. But Ball State, you get that first win. That first win is always the one that sets the tone of the season. Eastern Michigan, of course, they traveled to Washington, the national runner-up from a year ago, and for all intents and purposes, 30-9, Eastern Michigan was in this game for quite a while. They led 3-0 at the end of the first quarter, and Jesus Gomez, I want to give him his props, banged 2 field goals in from 50+. This first one of the day was almost a 60-yarder. And I think looking at it, this one probably could have cleared it from 60. It was a 57-yard field goal with 7 seconds left in the first quarter. Eastern Michigan would not do much more damage the rest of the way. They actually, Gomez had all of their points. He had 3 field goals. A second quarter field goal from 29 yards out to make it a 7-6 game in favor of the Huskies. And then Gomez wraps it up in the fourth quarter with another field goal, this one from 50 yards out. Cole Snyder, 16 of 27. Not much to say. Dante McMillan, 8 carries, 33 yards. These are just kind of their leaders. Ziel Griffin, he had 2 catches, 35 yards. I think Eastern Michigan could have done worse. I do think that Washington putting up 21 points in the second quarter certainly doesn't help what your team's trying to do. But I think Eastern Michigan could have done worse. They came back after a nice win over UMass last week. You go out and you play a Big Ten opponent out west, which sounds so weird, by the way, guys. A Big Ten opponent out west. This isn't a bowl game. This is a regular season game. And you're playing a Big Ten opponent out on the West Coast. Doesn't sit right with me. I digress. Toledo at home against UMass. This, I'll be honest, guys. I'm not sure what's up with Toledo. The jerseys look great. They did an all gold uniform with the matte blue helmet, and I think that looks really good. Big opportunity here for Toledo to kind of really figure things out. Tucker Gleason, he had 3 touchdowns. I think that's fine. $175, but then you look at his completions. 8 of 23. And I'm a big Tucker Gleason fan. And when you tell me he went 8 of 23, guys, that's 34%. You could miss 34% of your passes and have a 65, 66% completion percentage, and people would say that's not a bad day for a quarterback. 34% was his day. I think the issue is, and I've said this since day one, my biggest concern was going to be this offensive line. Can they gel? Can they figure it out? Toledo's had historically good offensive lines. I don't know that they've figured it out quick enough and well enough. And that's the concern. They travel to Mississippi State this week, who hasn't looked stellar either, but it's still an SEC opponent. Highlights from this one, though, Juwan Newton, he got the scoring going early for the Rockets, a 40-yard pass from Tucker Gleason to put them up 7-0 early. And then Jaquez Stewart, in the second quarter, he takes it to the house, 98-yard kickoff return, and it felt like he did this thing in like 4 seconds. I mean, you watch this video and watch him race down the sideline and through the defenders. I mean, he just takes this one home. And it was a quick run, looked great on that, and I think that really kind of sparked Toledo a little bit. Obviously, UMass kicks a field goal with 1 second left to go in the first half to make it 17-13 in favor of Toledo. That would be about as close as UMass would get the rest of the way. Nope, I take that back. In the third quarter, they kicked a field goal to make it 17-16, and that would be the closest that UMass would get the rest of the way. Junior Vander Ross had a 73-yard touchdown catch, a nice pitch and catch there from Tucker Gleason, and that would push this one wide open. The Rockets would then follow it up with a Willie Shaw 4-yard touchdown run in the fourth quarter, and then to cap everything off, 30 seconds after UMass scored, and I think this is so funny, 30 seconds after UMass scored, their 8-yard run to make it an 8-point game, Anthony Torres catches a 7-yard touchdown pass to make it a 15-point game, and that's the ball game. You know, it's 2:26 left in the game. Toledo wins this one by 15 against future MAC opponent UMass. Big-time win for the Rockets. Moving on to FIU versus Central Michigan, not the outcome I think everybody was expecting. In fact, not the outcome a lot of people were expecting. To put it mildly, FIU, they were showing off in Pit Bowl Stadium. This is their first game down there in the newly renamed Pit Bowl Stadium, and they were having a party, and party they did. They went into halftime with a 28-8 lead, came back out, third quarter, 36-16, and then they just kept pouring it on. 52-16 was the final here. They scored 17 points in the fourth quarter, 16 points in the fourth quarter. They actually tried to convert a 2-point attempt at the top of the quarter and could not do so. So they scored 16 points in the fourth quarter. The most competitive quarter out of Central Michigan was the third quarter. And I know Jim McElwain is figuring things out. He's got his guys that he's trying to get. You know, Joe Labus, you know, he's 20 of 39, $151, 2 touchdowns, but 5 interceptions. That's the number that is going to be haunting him all week in practice. That's probably the number that's going to haunt Jim McElwain, the head coach up there, all week in practice. Miles Bailey, 8 carries, 54 yards. Marion Lukes, 10 carries, 37 yards. BJ Harris, 8 for 29. Tyler Jefferson, 3 for 23. Nari Biggins, 7 for 37. I mean, plenty of guys were doing great stuff. I mean, they rushed on the ground for $180. You can't complain about 180 rushing yards from your offense. You can't complain about 190 passing yards. I mean, that's a well-balanced offense. You just also can't throw 5 interceptions. And that to me screams that was the difference. Moving on to the penultimate game of the week, Ohio versus South Alabama. The Bobcats return home after the loss at Syracuse. And they welcome South Alabama, who they came into this game 0-1. And I got to tell you guys, a lot of you thought I was a little bit crazy for being a little bit high. But I really like this Ohio team. Parker Navarro, he's going to be a good quarterback. And he's been biding his time. He's been doing what he's needed to do to kind of take his reps and figure things out. He was 20 of 28 for 204 and 1 touchdown. No turnovers. That's the important thing. Ricky Hunt, 6 of 73. Anthony Tyus, the third, 17 of 74 for 1 touchdown. Parker Navarro also ran 13 carries, 61 yards, and a touchdown. Chase Hendricks, Rodney Harris, Coleman, Owen, Caleb Gossett, Mason Williams all had multiple catches, all contributed to that 204 receiving yard, passing yard total. Parker Navarro did have 1 fumble. No interceptions. He did have a fumble. Colby Garfield also recovered a fumble, so that helps out for the Bobcats. But I mean, I'm not as worried about this team as a lot of other people are, because yes, they lost a lot to the transfer portal. They lost their defensive coordinator, but it's Tim Albin. Save that first season he had. I'm not uncomfortable with what Tim Albin can do. I think he's a good coach. I think he understands football, and he understands what Ohio needs to do to be a competitive team. Tim Albin is a smart coach. They've had back-to-back 10-win seasons. This is going to be a fine team. Don't worry about them. The Bobcats do end up winning this one 27-20, and I really like what they did. They get an easy game this week against I believe it's Morgan State. And, I mean, that's a game Ohio should win. We saw Akron win this game a year ago. So I fully expect that they're going to get this win. But Parker Navarro has done what he's needed to do, has earned the right to be the QB1. And I really wish people would start learning to trust Tim Albin and what he's doing at Ohio. He's had 1 rough season in 3. Give Tim Albin time. Figure it out. I like Tim Albin. He's a player's coach. He's a people's coach. He loves football. He loves Athens. Tim Albin has done great things, and he's going to do great things with Ohio down in Athens. All right. We've talked everything else on the week. Northern Illinois, Notre Dame, and I just have 1.5 billion thoughts. And you guys are going to get some of them. You're not going to get all of them tonight, but you're going to get some of them. The Power 4 and the Group of 5 gap is non-existent. You've got good teams and you've got bad teams in every conference. The level of the good teams may vary, I'll give you that. But there are a group of 5 teams that can compete with the Power 4 teams on a regular basis. Notre Dame was the number 5 team in the country. Thomas Hammock knew his players had the talent and the ability to go into South Bend and win this thing. And they did. And they didn't just win. And I want to be clear. You know, everybody's like, oh, it was just 16-14. You're right. It was a low-scoring game. Northern Illinois led for all of this game except the third quarter. And then, of course, the entire fourth quarter saved the last 30 seconds. This was all Northern Illinois. Ontario Brown, Ethan Hampton. Ontario Brown had 20 carries for 100 yards. He didn't even play the entire second half. He came out and looked excellent. Ethan Hampton, 10 of 19 for 200 yards and a touchdown. He didn't need to do everything in the world. His defense did a great job. He came out and did what he needed to do to win. Gavin Williams, 17 carries, 59 yards. Trayvon Rudolph, he had a carry for 5 yards. Grayson Barnes, 1 carry for 2 yards. Now, Northern Illinois threw it to a lot of different guys. They had 9 different guys they threw the ball to. Ontario Brown had most of their receiving yards. But that doesn't take away what they did. In fact, that tells you that they've got a lot of depth. That tells you they've got a lot of guys who can do a lot of different things. This was Northern Illinois' first win over an AP top 5 program. Now, it's important to note, Northern Illinois, they have 38 losses in AP top 10 team against unranked opponents. And that is the most by any school in the AP era. Think about that. I think, one, Notre Dame is always overranked, always overhyped because of their quasi-alignment with the Power Four. If you want that respect, Notre Dame, join a conference. Join the ACC. Join the Big Ten. Join the Big 12. I don't care who you join. Every year, you're overranked. Every year, you disappoint. The year you played in the national championship and got blasted by Alabama, I didn't think you deserved to be in the national championship. The year you were in the playoffs a few years back, I didn't think you deserved that either. That all being said, Marcus Freeman, this is his 3rd year there at Notre Dame. I feel for the guy. I do. I know people are calling it for his head. You always hate to see that for a coach. But he did not have his team prepared. I'm going to go down the list here, and I'm going to look at some of the rest of these numbers for the team because I think this is important. First downs, Notre Dame 17, Northern Illinois 16. Third down efficiency, Notre Dame converted 3 of 10, 30%. Northern Illinois was 6 of 16. Fourth downs, Notre Dame didn't go for any. Northern Illinois converted 50%. Total yards, and this is the stat that's important. 388 yards for Northern Illinois, 286 for Notre Dame. Northern Illinois outgained you by over 100 yards. Yards per pass, Northern Illinois was averaging almost 10. Notre Dame was averaging just under 5. Rushing, on the ground, Northern Illinois outgained the Irish by 67 yards, 190 to 123. Now, Northern Illinois ran the ball a lot more, and their yards per rush average was less than that of Notre Dame, 45 rushes to 28, and 4.2 yards to 4.4. Penalties were the same. I do think the refs tried to give Notre Dame a little bit of a home cook in there in the late in the fourth quarter, and objective or not, I think everybody knows exactly what I'm talking about. That third down attempt where Gavin Williams was very clearly over the first down marker, and the refs spotted him very short. But it set up the Northern Illinois field goal. The other stat that I think is very important, and this is something that coaches talk about all the time. Northern Illinois didn't turn the ball over. Notre Dame turned it over twice. Ball security is so critical in a game where points are at a premium. There were 77,000 people there to watch this game, to watch the Irish lose to Northern Illinois. They got paid $1.4 million to come into South Bend and win this game. I don't know what Marcus Freeman was thinking at the end of the game when he had the Irish try a field goal. I think you had maybe another opportunity to take a quick shot and get a little bit closer, but a 62-yard field goal, I'll be honest, I was expecting a fake. You get a guy to roll out the right way, and hey, maybe you break this thing off and go for a score. That's honestly what I was thinking was going to happen. But I do think that Coach Thomas Hammock, who, by the way, you guys have heard me do interviews with him at Media Day and stuff before. He is one of my favorite coaches in this league, not just because of this win. I mean, this is incredible for him and the program, and I'm so happy for Northern Illinois. Thomas Hammock is truly a player's coach. He's a guy who has been in their shoes. He is a guy who was brought up through this program. He understands in and out what it means to be a Husky. Thomas Hammock is truly Northern Illinois, and I know he's heard the calls for his head. When you lost that game against Southern Illinois a year ago, that 14-11 game, there were calls for his head. You won that bowl game this year against Butch Jones. There were calls for your head because it was kind of a... Thomas Hammock has worked so hard to build this program to where he's wanted it to be. And to see him and this program rewarded with a win like this over a team like Notre Dame at their place speaks volumes about what that program has been building for the last 5 years under Coach Hammock. In the ever-changing landscape of college football, when you secure a win like this on the road, that's going to mean more than some of the wins of yesteryear. We all know that players were getting paid under the table and illegal recruiting. We all know that. But now in the landscape of NIL, when a star player like an Ontario Brown could have said, you know what, I'll take the $500,000 bag to go to Illinois or to go to Northwestern, where, you know, whoever would offer. For him to stay at Northern Illinois is a testament to what Coach Hammock is doing. And then not only for him to stay there, but for other guys to come in and be contributors and get on board with what Coach Hammock is preaching at Northern Illinois. That also speaks volumes. This was such an amazing victory. This is not one of those games that you look back on and you're like, oh, well, it was a fluke. I mean, people are going to say it was a fluke. They're always going to say it's a fluke because that's what they say when a group of 5 team pulls off an upset. But I'll be honest with you guys, I don't really feel like this is an upset. I feel like Notre Dame, year in and year out, consistently overrated. Northern Illinois, after a 7-6 year a year ago, a little bit underrated. I get it. The MAC, they've struggled on the national stage the last several years. I get it. But this was a big win for Northern Illinois, for the Mid-American Conference, for the group of 5. You know, I know Boise State played Oregon unbelievably close and lost a close game out there. But this was a huge, huge statement for the group of 5 that says, no matter how hard you try to kill us off with giving us one conference or one playoff bid for the college football playoffs, with the NIL landscape, with the transfer portal, because that's what they're doing, guys. They're trying to kill off the group of 5 and get them to roll over, die, and accept some sort of relegation. This was a statement win because it told the Power 4, we're still competing, we're still fighting, you're not getting rid of us that easily, and I am praying that whoever gets a group of 5 team in the first round of the college football playoffs this year, I am praying that group of 5 team wins. Tom Fornelli, I think, is who it was, came out and said, oh, this is why I hate the playoffs, the new format. Well, Tom, listen. Ohio State lost to Virginia Tech, who went 6-6 in, I believe, the first year of the college football playoffs. Made the playoffs. Won the national championship in the 4-team playoff. This wasn't a 12-team. Ohio State did that. We've been told conference championships don't matter. Just 2 years ago, Ohio State was in the playoffs after not even playing in the Big Ten championship. And we're a field goal away from probably winning a national championship. Because I think if they did anything like what Georgia did to TCU, Ohio State would have been national champion winners back in 2022. I also think we've seen Georgia and Alabama in the playoffs multiple times. We saw Clemson and Notre Dame in the playoffs back when they were both in the ACC together. So we've already decided that early season losses don't matter for these power programs. We've decided that these December stay-at-home / lose your conference championship games, we decided that doesn't matter if you're a power team. And that was all under the 4-team playoff. So, Tom, where was that argument when all of this was going on? Did you hate the playoffs then? Or is it just because it's a group of 5 team that now has a seat at the table and they're going to come out and compete with these Power 4 programs and say, hey, you're giving us a seat, we're going to show you why we earn it? Is that why you're upset? Because let's say Northern Illinois goes 12-0. Let's say they beat NC State. Let's say they run the table in the MAC. They win the MAC. Not saying it's going to happen, but let's just say that happens. And let's say Notre Dame somehow finds a way to get to 11-1. Are you going to tell me that both teams don't deserve to be in? Or that somehow Notre Dame deserves to be ranked higher? Because by my calculations, depending on how things shake out, Northern Illinois and Notre Dame will play about the same amount of ranked teams the rest of the way. I'm just saying, I think that we need to pump the brakes on this idea that the playoffs are now ruined because it's a 12-team. In fact, I think that they're more enhanced because this Northern Illinois game, yes, it meant a lot to Northern Illinois, and it had implications for Notre Dame. But this is exactly what people were talking about. You know, maybe Notre Dame doesn't deserve to make the playoffs. Maybe this loss should force them out. Maybe it should tell them, hey, you got to join a conference if you want a shot at this thing now. Maybe that's good for college. Maybe that's the one realignment I'm okay with. But also, I think this is what we said was going to happen. We said that early season games weren't going to be meaningful, yet here we are somehow in week 2 already talking about Northern Illinois being the group of 5 representative in the college football playoff and talking about whether or not Notre Dame deserves to be in. That sounds pretty meaningful to me. I'm just saying, going back to that, actually, my other example of Notre Dame getting into the playoffs when they won the ACC after losing to Clemson earlier in the year. We decided that them and Clemson both deserved to be in because they were 1-1 against each other. There's so many things that don't add up here. I wish you would just tell the world that you don't like the group of 5, Tom. That's really my wish. If you would just tell the world that, I think we could all be okay. We could all move on and deal with it. And I see all these fans and whatnot. Oh, Notre Dame doesn't deserve to be in. That's fine. Those are great discussions to have. It's week 2 of the college football season. We don't know what's going to happen to Notre Dame. You're creating a fake hypothetical off of something we know nothing about yet. If Northern Illinois goes 0 the rest of the way, 2-10. If Notre Dame loses 3 more games, they're out anyway. They're not going to put a 4-loss Notre Dame into the college football playoffs, even at a 12-team. They're going to give the at-large to the Big Ten and the SEC. We already know this. That's been well established. The committee's in the back pocket of those conferences. We already know what's going to happen. So don't do this holier-than-thou, high and mighty garbage that says, hey, Notre Dame, you're going to get into the playoffs because blah, 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 blah. No, it's garbage. It's this hypothetical nonsense that the sports media continues to push out that says we have college football teams who are our quote-unquote blue bloods. By the way, Notre Dame hasn't won a national championship since the 80s. So, that's 2 generations of college football ago? I wasn't alive. Most of my friends weren't alive. So, and here we are, we're in our 30s. So don't tell me that this era of college football is so much greater and that everything from then counts. Because if you're going to count national championships from the 80s, you got to count the BYU national championship. You've got to count all these other things that these other programs have done in that same time period, but you don't want to because, well, it wasn't the real national championship. No, I think we're in a new era. 2014 and forward is the current era of college football. From 97 to 2013, the BCS era, that was last generation of college football. A lot of that still relevant, a lot of that important. But that was the last generation. And then 96 and before was a different era. So we're 2 generations removed from the Notre Dame's last national champion, or from Notre Dame's last national championship, excuse me. Don't sit here and tell me that the group of 5 doesn't deserve a spot, doesn't whatever. Notre Dame is not a blue blood anymore. Notre Dame gets the benefit of the doubt based off of what they've done historically, but if you haven't done anything in 2 generations of college football, you've won an ACC championship in a COVID year. That, to me, does not scream dominance. That, to me, does not scream blue blood. And you could have said the same thing for Michigan until they won 3 Big Ten championships, until they made the college football playoffs 3 straight years, and finally won a national championship. But at least they had at least a shared title in 97. Which, everybody still has that debate, Nebraska, Michigan, Nebraska. Again, I don't care. I think when you look at all of it, though, you gotta say, is Notre Dame really a blue blood? And I really think we should probably reclassify what a blue blood is, because this isn't the same era of college football that it once was, and the same teams aren't sitting at the top like they once were. Now, I'm going to take nothing away from Northern Illinois. They earned every point in that win over an AP top 5 team. I also don't want to take anything from Notre Dame. Perhaps they're a very good team. And Northern Illinois out-schemed them and outplayed them. But if that's the case, should Northern Illinois be ranked lower than Notre Dame, who we now have a head-to-head result over? If this was week 12 or week 10 and Northern Illinois was sitting at 7-2 or 6-3, I get the argument. Especially if Notre Dame is undefeated, right? 10-0. But now we have a Northern Illinois team who's 2-0, who just beat the number 5 team in the country on the road. Again, at their place. And I think that's very important when you talk about rankings. They jumped up from AP, I think, 66, 65, which I think probably far too low. And again, probably hindsight a little bit. I recognize that. But you have Notre Dame drop 13 spots. And they're still sitting above the team that just beat them on their turf by 7 spots. They're sitting at 17, 18 in the country. Northern Illinois is sitting at 25, which, hey, I'm so happy for Northern Illinois. This is the earliest we've seen a MAC team in the playoffs or in the polls since 2002, I believe, is what Hustlebelt said. Shout out to Hustlebelt, by the way. This is the first time we've seen a team rank this high in the polls, or this early in the polls, and I think that's huge. So shout out to Northern Illinois. But this isn't week 7, 8, 9, where, okay, we could say that was a fluke game. We have no idea what these teams are yet. So why are we going to continue to rank Notre Dame with the benefit of the doubt when we have an objective, hard proof result of what they've done against now a fellow top 25 team? I think If you wanted to keep Notre Dame in the top 25, you put them at 25. You put Northern Illinois at 24. Some people don't like that, and that's fine. And I get that, and I respect that opinion. I get that, those rankings ebb and flow, but I do think that they need to ebb and flow appropriately. And when you have a head-to-head result early in the season, especially at week 1, week 2, you don't leave the team that just lost ranked higher than the team who just beat you, who also now happens to be undefeated, when you're sitting at 500 or lower. Doesn't make sense to me. I don't like it. Somebody please explain it to me. That all being said, guys, I am so excited to start a new segment. Looking to start that this week, actually, and not going to do it alone. I'm going to be doing a Game of the Week breakdown. We're going to probably toy with what we'll call the segment, but it's going to be a Game of the Week breakdown, and I'm going to be one game of the upcoming football weekend. And, when we get to midweek games, we'll adjust that accordingly, probably release the episode Sunday night, whatever. But one game on the weekend, and it's going to be a Friday episode, and I'm going to break down one of those games. And I'm going to let you guys kind of pick. This isn't I'm going to choose which one I think is best. I've already gotten a couple comments already on Twitter about which game I should do, a couple DMs as well, so thank you guys. And I'll leave you in suspense a little bit, but it's behind the tape, behind the curtain, or in the huddle, something. We're gonna come up with some sort of fun name with what we're gonna call this, but it's gonna be a quick segment, probably 20-30 minutes, and we're gonna break down the MAC team and the opponent. Now, if it's a conference game, we're going to break down both sides, both MAC schools. But for these non-con games, we're going to break down who they're playing, what their season's looking like, key players to watch out for, whatever. And then for the MAC team, same thing, And then we're going to do predictions, things like that. So I'm really excited to start doing that. I'm going to be bringing on a familiar voice. You guys know him. You guys love him. Graham Giles. Good friend of mine, of course, fellow MAC grad and MAC connoisseur. He's going to be helping me out with a couple of those. And we've got a good one in store for you guys, so already been talking about it, already been figuring out what we're going to do. So really excited to get that kicked off and to try to do a couple episodes a week for you guys. It's I know my content has been admittedly a little lacking. I recognize that, and I want to apologize to you guys, but I'm not going away. I'm still going to be delivering you content. It's just with everything going on with grad school and working this job for the university, things have gotten a little bit tougher, and I can recognize that, and I owe you guys that apology and that explanation. Things will be better this next time around, and we're going to push forward. We're going to get some great content out and keep the love alive, keep the hope alive for a great football season and for more fly the flag victories for the Mid-American Conference. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. It's as always, it's appreciated. Please go check out all my social medias. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter X at the MSC Podcast. You can find me on Facebook at the Mac Sports Connection Podcast or on YouTube at MSC Podcast. Trying to do more content, different things for you guys. I really appreciate all the love and support. Please, please, please spread the word. Just broke 3,300 followers. Again, all thanks to you guys. I could not do what I do without your love, your support, your shares, your likes, all your interactions. Please keep pushing that. Please keep helping me to spread the love of MAC, to make sure everybody in the world knows about our tiny, wonderful, beautiful conference. Thank you guys so very much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you later this week.